Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Stories of Resilience, Voices from Across British Columbia's Interior. This is a special presentation by the Resilience Institute. They will be sharing with us inspiring stories from community members impacted by wildfires across BC, including their perspectives on what resilience means in the context of climate change. This session is part of Prepared Together, Canadian Red Cross Disaster Preparedness Virtual Learning Series. Today's session is presented in English. The spring and summer of 2024 have been bringing an unprecedented level of intensity for emergencies across the country. The goal of this learning series is to support people and communities to prepare for, increase their resilience to, and respond to future disasters. You can use the QR code on your screen to visit our website to learn more about and register for our other programming in English and French. And we will also post the web pages for you in the chat. And just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Today's webinar will be recorded and recordings will be sent to all registrants. Closed captioning is available in both English and French. Just click the closed captioning button in your Zoom control panel. At the end of today's session, we will have a Q&A period. Please leave your questions in the Q&A box in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. And there will be a feedback survey that launches on your browser once you exit today's webinar. We really appreciate your input on how we did today. Resource packages from all of our sessions will be on the CRC website this summer as well. And any questions you have about today's programming, you can email us at rrr@redcross.ca. And we acknowledge that much of our work in Canada is on the traditional, treaty, and unceded territories home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Each of us resides on the traditional land of the First Peoples of Turtle Island. Let us take a moment to acknowledge the shared history of Indigenous peoples and settlers in this land with the goal of reconciliation. So please just take a moment and share in the Zoom chat where you are from or live today. Moments like this allow us to connect in the spirit of collaboration, friendship, and reconciliation to value the ways of being, knowing, and learning of all Indigenous peoples and nations across Turtle Island. So please, in the webinar chat, please tell us where you're joining us from today. While folks are taking a minute to do that, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies has seen fundamental principles, which we also honor in Canada. Interestingly, these principles align with the Indigenous peoples of Canada's 7 sacred teachings. Where I reside on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe peoples, these are also known as the grandfather teachings of wisdom, love, respect, bravery, honesty, humility, and truth. And our guests for today are Laura Lyons and Tina Elliott from the Resilience Institute. Laura is the co-founder of the Resilience Institute. Laura recently received the Dean's Excellence Award at the Strathclyde University Law School, and prior to that, the American Sociological Association's Jane Goodall Fellowship for her work on perceptions on inclusion of large carnivores in communities. And Tina holds a master's in environment and sustainability, and she blends her academic research experience with her experience in frontline, community-based agencies to foster evidence-based, practical climate adaptations. I would now like to welcome both Laura and Tina to join us on screen. Thank you so much for presenting today. Looking forward to this presentation.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Hi, Tina.
Hello. I'm just going to begin with sharing our screen.
Terrific. So the way our presentation is this morning is I'm going to just give a little bit of backgrounder of the Resilience Institute and how the stories of resilience came about. I'm joining you today from Treaty 7 territory, home of Alberta Métis Number 3, also called Canmore, which is just outside Banff National Park. For those of you who know the area, it's about 4 hours away from Jasper National Park, and our thoughts and energy in many ways, because we have colleagues and staff who live and work in Jasper, thinking about them all at this time. So the Resilience Institute is a small but mighty charitable organization. We are a passionate group of experts in climate change, and there is no lack of passion, as you will see when I pass it over to my colleague Tina, who is going to dig into the Roots for Resilience from BC project. And am I able to change the slides, Tina, or do you have to? Okay.
Just give me a nod.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so we can move on to the next one. You'll be able to see these as well. A focus area of our work, while we are broad in climate change adaptation work and resilience, we can do some mitigation as well, but we have chosen some focus areas because climate change is huge and we can't do everything. So we focus on small, rural, and Indigenous communities that are on the front lines of climate change. And our goal is to partner and work in transdisciplinary ways at the convergence of disaster risk reduction and adaptation. Okay. Apply it. So we can go through these pretty quick, Tina. We take a transdisciplinary approach with applied research. That means working with organizations like the Red Cross, academia, and other NGO and industry partners. Participatory informed education. So we will have short courses for people, technical resources. Learning is shared through podcasts and stories, which we're going to talk mostly about today. Okay. And we'll just let you know that if you did miss it, there has been a launch of a new program called Roots for Resilience, and this is in partnership with the Canadian Red Cross, where we are working again with this small, rural, and Indigenous communities at the convergence of disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation, which is truly a very unique program. For those of you here today, you'll know that often adaptation is done separately from risk reduction, and many of these activities, if brought together, can create a much more robust plan, and we need to move faster, as we're seeing. So this is why we're working on that. So what we mean by resilience, we're saying this word a lot. When we say that, we're talking about multiple ways of being resilient, from the personal resilience and climate resilience, community-based resilience. So what does a holistic view of resilience mean? Okay. And the stories of resilience. So this program started a few years ago. The idea was that there was many stories being shared by the media, especially, which we tend to get most of our news from, about the disasters and the trauma, and of course, we need to know those things and hear them. But in order to unite people, we wanted to really try to bring out what makes us strong, what makes us be able to work together. And so we started this program, Stories of Resilience, working with communities as an engagement process alongside of other adaptation work that they're doing and resilience work. So if you can imagine, there's a lot of planning that takes place when you're doing the built and natural type of adaptation. But what about engaging communities? And what about their values and their feelings? And what are the things that other communities who have been through disasters can teach and share? Because we're seeing, and we're really seeing this play out with Jasper, of how many people who have been through big events are just sharing their stories and ideas about what can help. Okay, next slide. So this is just an example of Mary Ruth McDougall, who is an elder at the Piikani Nation. She shared her story of, from her perspective, what it means to be resilient as elder, as a Blackfoot woman, as somebody who had teachings that could help her community bring out those ways of thinking and being in the era of climate change. So we worked with a group of people from the Piikani Nation. We still are working with youth now to do a youth version of the stories. And this actually, if you're in Banff this summer, the Stories of Resilience is on exhibition at the Cave and Basin Historical Site. And yay, over to Tina now to get into the Voices Across British Columbia Interior Project, which was so much fun. Okay, thanks, Tina. I'll just turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Laura. My name is Tina Elliott. I was the project lead for Stories of Resilience, Voices from Across British Columbia's Interior. I'm joining today from Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And yes, we're going to shift now and talk a little bit more specifically about the initiative itself. One of the ways that we typically talk about stories of resilience is with these words. They were on a prior slide, but I'd like to share them with you because they inspired me throughout the project. And I hope that you can hold these words in your mind as we talk about the project. So they are this. A single story has the power to change our hearts and our minds. Our collective stories, if shared, have the potential to change futures. So the initiative sought to learn from and amplify the voices of those impacted by the 2017 wildfires. We offered multiple pathways to contribute, and the stories that were shared represent diverse lived experiences from a variety of locations across the interior. The project was prompted by the wildfire season in BC in the summer of 2017, where over 100 interface fires broke out across the interior, impacting numerous communities. There were multiple evacuation orders, often involving the same people multiple times. And ultimately, there was a burning of over 12,000 square kilometers and 444 homes, which displaced 39,000 people for varying lengths of time. Since 2017, we've continued to see record-breaking wildfire seasons, and we know there is a need to learn and adapt. Hence, Stories of Resilience, Voices from Across British Columbia's Interior, which was carried out in partnership with the Canadian Red Cross, and it collected and shared stories, artworks, and other creative forms of communication from a diverse group of residents across the interior about what it means to be resilient in the face of climate change impacts. So as I mentioned, we offered residents multiple pathways to participate, in large part in order to reduce barriers to participation. So one pathway offered people the option to participate through short online submissions of writing and imagery, which again facilitated participation for people who might not be able to commit to the full participatory path. That pathway was a more intensive journey that engaged people fully as participatory storytellers. It spanned many months and a variety of virtual and in-person activities. So for the online participation pathway, we invited people to submit images, so photos or artworks accompanied by short narratives. And we asked for ideas and stories, which were gathered through Likert style and open-ended questions. And we inquired about resilience from a variety of angles, including community building, connection with nature, and generally what helps and hinders personal and community resilience. And ultimately, we had 18 people join the project this way, and their contributions are shared partially in our print materials, but in full on our story map, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So I'd like to share a couple of pieces that came through online. So one participant, a resident of Vanderhoof, said, "To me, resilience means going through the tough and coming out not necessarily stronger, but growing." Another participant, Susan from Kamloops, shared this image called Landing. And she shared, "This image was painted from a photo that I took on one of the hottest days of the year. It was about 5 o'clock in the evening and the temperature was about 38 degrees. The planes that had been fighting a number of fires in the interior all returned to the Kamloops airport, one after the other at the same time every evening." So as I mentioned, alternatively, people could participate through the full learning journey. And we had 8 storytellers join us that way, whose journey began with a series of workshops that explored resilience through a variety of lenses. And we also had workshops on the art of storytelling. Excuse me. We were lucky to have Claudia Cornwall join the project, and she is not only a creative writing teacher, but also an established artist. So she was able to really work with us to help us develop stories in a really solid way. The participants also worked one-on-one with our project artist, Liz Tui-Weiss, to create stunning artworks that highlight their lived experiences. And Liz devised this unique means of collaborative art making so that while she did the painting, the art was created from the vision and inspiration of the storytellers. And if you go and take in the stories and the art, you will see the connection between what's shared in the story and how that's visually represented in the art. So toward the end of the participation period, we had a final workshop in Kamloops, which served as an in-person celebration and another learning opportunity. We had a workshop called Exploring Our Resilient Selves through Syilx storytelling, which was guided by Cree and Syilx storyteller Christopher Derrickson, who joined us from an Indigenous-led organization from the interior that uses transformative storytelling to guide learners through complex conversations. Similarly, we were joined by the Feet First Playback Theater troupe. And if you haven't heard of playback theater, it's this amazing tool to facilitate dialogue and exploration of complex issues such as wildfire impacts, resilience, and disaster risk reduction. And what they do is they are a specially trained troupe. They train specially for this kind of improvisational theater, and they drew inspiration and stories and ideas from the audience, and then they play it back immediately after using music, movement, and dialogue. So I'll shift now and share a bit about some of the outcomes and outputs that we were able to create through this process. There are many, I'll just touch on a few here, but they've been showcased and preserved in numerous methods and artistic outputs, reaching thousands of people in person and tens of thousands virtually. So we had a couple of community exhibits. We created compilation books. We have our story map. We also created resilience journals and are developing podcasts. So this spring, we gathered in Williams Lake and Kamloops, and community members were invited to celebrate and experience the stories and artworks. We had performances again by the Feet First Playback Theater. And we had full-size banners. Each event was attended by about 60 people or so. And there was lots of conversation and new connections being made, both person to person and in people's minds. It was a very, very warm, very warmly received by the communities and the attendees. All of the books, all of the stories and artworks are also showcased in a hard copy book like this. They are very beautiful. The art is very beautiful, and we created about 300 of them, which were largely given out at the exhibits and around the communities in the interior. As I mentioned, we created a story map. So for those who aren't able to get a copy of the book, you can go and take in the creations online. And story maps are a unique way to showcase people's stories and artworks. And I highly encourage you. We have a link that we are happy to share for everyone to go and read the stories and take in the artworks. And there you can also see all of the online contributions as well. I was especially excited to be able to create these resilience journals. They are pocket-sized journals that feature the words and the artwork of our participants, but also prompt people to write their own stories and reflections. And I think that this is a really good way to not only share the beautiful creations of the project, but also reach a lot of other people and get others thinking about what resilience means to them. And lastly, like I said, we're developing a few podcasts using the voices of the participants and also the artist who shares a little bit more about what it means to use art as a way to deal with and explore these complex topics. So through the project, there were several key themes that emerge, topics that were returned to over and over again. So those include community, holistic health, preparing, mitigating, and adapting, and connection. So the first, community, is the idea that we can, should, and do rely so much on each other and how powerful that is. This is one of our full participants, Judy Banks, and her words are really powerful. I'd like to share them with you. She says, find your community, your home, use it, bring people together, even if it's not fire season. I don't care if it's the dead of winter, get people together, communalize resilience. If you want to be resilient, find the hall. If you don't already have a community hall, build one. Excuse me. Another way that this was expressed was as community with animals. So one of our other storytellers told her story through the lens of one of her horses. So she is a self-professed horsewoman, horse trainer and keeper, and her horses really are her life. So this is just an excerpt from her story. A black cloud changed our lives forever. There is a smell in the air, and the sky is wrong. We are in our crowded beige cubicles where nothing ever happens, and we stand and wait for when we can go out and run under the sky. But today the sky is one terrible black cloud, and it billows towards us. The managers are talking. They are calm but walking fast. I know something is wrong. So that's from Sloan from Ashcroft, BC. And as I said, she wrote her story from the perspective of one of her horses. And for her, the idea of resilience was best expressed through her connection with those she spends much of her life with, her community, which is her horses. The second theme was holistic health. And specifically, people talked a lot about the importance of addressing health beyond the physical and financial, but also looking at mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And so one of our online contributors from Vanderhoof said this. She said, talk it out, see a counselor, nurse, physician, and family and friends. You are not alone. It's okay not to be okay. That was reiterated from one of our full participants, a young woman named Libby, who joined the project. She was formerly a firefighter, and you can see here in her painting, that is her and her brother represented there, who were both firefighters walking through the remains of a fire. and they both lost their homes in Lytton, BC. So this young woman has a lot of experience. She's very brave and frank in her story when she speaks about resilience, and that it is a journey and a process, and that her own mental well-being needed a lot of tending to after her experiences. But still, she says that she is more resilient now than ever. The third theme was preparing, mitigating, and adapting. And we often see these words or these elements in the standard disaster management cycle and from professionals that work in that way. So in a sense, it's not new, but I felt it was new. It was new in the way that people were talking about and thinking about preparing, mitigating, and adapting. And that was really impactful for me and each other, I think. I got the sense that there's an air of change in the way that the participants came to these topics, suggesting to me that people are really curious about finding new ways and looking outside themselves to try something new. As an example, I have this quote from John Dell, who is one of our storytellers from Williams Lake. And you may know that that is the birthplace of the Orange Shirt movement. And so he shares a great deal in his story about what he learned through the Truth and Reconciliation events held there in his hometown of Williams Lake. He says, if we are to find ways to strengthen resiliency in individuals and communities, we can learn from those who have been shown to be resilient in their past. The ranchers of Hansville, the communities and First Nations of the Caribou all overcame the crisis they faced and bounced back. There is much to be learned from these groups and individuals. The last theme is around connection. There seems to be a deep desire for connection to nature, culture, and home, things that ground us. So storyteller Claudia Cornwall in her story shares about evacuating her family cabin. It's very remote. And so they had to leave by boat during the fires and the impact that had on her. She says, as we get into our boat, I take one last look at the cabin. This was where Gordon had invited me to visit on the May long weekend when I was 17 years old. This was also where we brought our kids, even before they could walk, just so they could hear the loons call and the beavers slap their tails at dusk. Another storyteller, Bala Naku, framed his story of resilience in the interplay of the turtle and the salmon. Bala has one foot in his homes in India and Nepal and another in his new home in Kamloops. He shares, like the turtle, I continue to visit and nurture my ties with family, friends, and communities in India and Nepal. Then I return to Kamloops, like a salmon, to continue working with students and communities in BC. I navigate these two worlds and protect hatching grounds of mine that make me feel secure, safe, and at times resilient. So lastly, I'd like to share some of the lessons that we learned, or rather were reinforced to us. The first is the importance of flexibility and adaptability. And I think this applies to resilience itself, but also very much in the ways that we delivered the project and walked the learning journey with participants. Being flexible and adaptive allows for the unexpected to come about without it being as disruptive, and further inviting new opportunities. So for example, opportunities to engage with artists, performance artists like the playback theater. It also increases accessibility, so we can pivot and shift as needed depending on what people need and what life throws at us. So for example, last summer, as the BC wildfire season again was causing stress for many people across the interior, including our participants, one participant expressed having wildfire fatigue. And so we were able to talk about that, and he took a step back and took a break, kind of regrouped, and when he was ready, came back to the project. Another key lesson is around the importance of establishing a clear project culture and building a strong community. We took a fair amount of time building relationships with the participants and the other project supports like the performance troupe and the artists, and with ourselves, of course. And that gave everybody a chance to get to know each other and feel a little bit more secure and safe in the community. And in my opinion, this was absolutely foundational to the successes of the project overall. And through this, we saw the evolution of a new bona fide community of itself, of people from really diverse backgrounds. One participant at the end of the project said, "I find it so interesting that the members of our group share so many values, even though we come from quite different parts of the province and have had quite different life trajectories." And from this authentic, emergent community with multiple layers of connection, there were lots of shifts in thinking. We learned a lot from each other. I keep including myself because they were all teachers for me. People's behaviors changed, ideas changed around resilience to climate impacts. And not only can those things arise from projects like this, but they did. I really saw it. So thank you for listening. I think we have time for questions.
Thank you so much, Laura and Tina. And I'm just checking the Q&A box. I don't see any questions there yet, but if anyone does have any inquiries, you can use the chat or the Q&A box. You pick.
I have a question. I have a question for Tina. So Tina, you had this experience. It was more of a regional focus and an open call for participants. Kind of not really. We set up a basic structure. If somebody wanted to do this in their own community, what would be a few key points that you'd want to share? Like I'm thinking a couple points might be to keep it simple, but have some structure. So it's the idea of combining some kind of creative output with a theme and picking one or two themes instead of it being really broad, just about climate change. I found that to be really helpful in other ones that we've done. But what are a few take homes maybe that you'd want to give to somebody who says, you know, I want to do something like this in my community?
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to go back to what you said. I think that it was really valuable that we had a meeting place. Resilience. We had some examples, but it wasn't overly prescriptive. And so as we came together, in a sense, the people, the participants, but also the artists, the creative folks, together we shaped what it ultimately would be. And so there's this nice balance of having a structure, like you said, and having a meeting place, a common ground where we can all meet and talk about perhaps it's a specific theme, topic. It may even be an event, but then allow for people to go from there in a way that makes sense for them, what kind of story they want to tell. Like Sloan telling her story through the eyes of her horse was just absolutely so creative and amazing. And also those artistic outputs. So having a lot of or artistic methods, having the oral storytelling, written storytelling, performance art, visual art, because people I think are going to connect in different ways, and different things are going to help them connect in their hearts and minds about what resilience means to them. So yeah, I think, and a lot of collaboration, right? And like I said, the flexibility and adaptability of working with people and meeting people where they're at.
We also found that having a few workshops, educational workshops at the beginning can really help. So for example, in one iteration of this, we did fire and ice, and we had a workshop on wildfires and projections within that region for that community. And then also the ice part was glacier melt and what that might mean for people within the region. And in another version of that, we had it ice jams because it was up in the north, and the water aspect of it was actually the danger of ice jams. So people would learn a little bit about the science behind it, and then talk with their community. Not like we had exchanges between youth and seniors or elders, and then the output was actually a narrative on, oh, you know, we've got this in our community, but here we have these resources, and here's what we feel we can do. So that's one option too.
That's awesome. Great to know. And Titash Chowdhury asks, thanks for the presentation. How do you navigate grants and funding opportunities to organize such initiatives, especially in urban spaces?
So I can respond to that. We're a charitable organization, so we established a program and then we look for grants. So it depends on what, you know, if you're a community group, if you're a nonprofit, or if you're not, but you're interested in doing that, I would suggest working with a nonprofit or a charity that's in the community to be able to do that with you, and start small. Like just create a small project, aligning art and story making. I think there's a lot of funding out there, especially at the community-based level, for things like this, because it's a unifying type of project. So that would be my recommendation there.
This doesn't really speak to funding so much, but kind of to the last two questions in conjunction. One of the workshops we did was simply called "What is Resilience Anyway?" And we just threw out some ideas of different takes on resilience and then had a conversation about it. And so very simple, but really effective, and really got people thinking in different ways.
Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any other questions in the box. And Titash just said thank you for your answer. Yeah, if folks have any other questions for the both of you after the fact, is there an email address that they can reach you at?
Yeah, you bet. I'm going to put our outreach email in there. That's pretty easy. Outreach at resilienceinstitute.ca. Hopefully I'll spell it right. But yeah, they can, and that will either come to Tina or I. Great. Yes. And do have a look at all the different stories. We really think they're quite inspirational. And just so you know, we are launching, we're switching over our website, and we will have a knowledge hub where a lot of the outputs from the stories and the work that we're doing will be also repurposed and put into podcasts and other ways for people to engage. And again, our whole idea is to get as many diverse voices out there as possible, to be accessible, and to really broaden the scope of what it means to be resilient in this really quite scary time that we're entering with climate change. And the summers that we're experiencing can be quite scary. So hopefully we'll be able to help a little bit by uniting people through our common stories.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. And Peter says, thanks. I welcome the opportunity to hear these stories from people experiencing these disasters. Absolutely. And I am aware that this webinar, among a few others, have been circulating among communities who have been impacted by the Jasper fires, et cetera. So this is really timely as well, and very relevant to what's happening across Canada today. So thank you so much, Tina and Laura, for joining us, for sharing these really impactful stories with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us.
Take care, everybody. Have a good day.